Hello, everyone. I'm Stephen Bardo, Leadership Ambassador for the National Society of Leadership and Success. Pleased to bring you another edition of the Thought Leaders series. We bring in experts and leaders from various areas around the country to provide insight for all the students that are involved with the National Society of Leadership and Success. It's a pleasure to bring in a good friend of mine, Arne Duncan. Arne, thanks a lot for joining us, man.
Great to see you again.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, we go way back, and we'll get into that a little bit. Arne, as you all may or may not know, was the former education secretary for the United States. So Arne doesn't come off as a big deal, but he's a big deal to us. So let me go right into it, man. Let's do a little chronological breakdown of your past. You're a Chicago native, played at lab school. Tell me about being able to have success on the court and being able to transfer that over to Harvard University where you attended college.
So I grew up in this pretty unique situation of living in Hyde Park, which is middle class and integrated. My dad was a professor at the University of Chicago, and I was born in '64, but in 1961 my mother started an inner city after school program on 46th Street, which was like 2 miles from our house, but 47th Street was the barrier between middle class integrated Hyde Park and basically all black, all poor, North Kentwood, Oakland. And so having the chance to go to a great school academically, but literally grow up as a part of my mother's after school program in the neighborhood, playing ball in that neighborhood, gave me a chance to have both a great academic experience, but also a great athletic experience, and most importantly for me, a great chance to spend lots of time with folks who were amazing young people, but weren't born of all the luck and privilege that I was born with. And that sort of has shaped my life's work.
So that early childhood experience was an impetus for you to get into service? Is that what kind of led you to service?
Absolutely. And what I saw with my mother's program is, again, just growing up, is kids who, no one had an intact family.
Right.
No one had parents who'd gone to college, all the gang issues, all the drugs and everything else and crime. But I saw all these young men and women who were part of my mother's program go on to do extraordinary things. And that talked a lot of the guy who taught me growing up. Her whole philosophy was 10-year-olds taught 5-year-olds and 15-year-olds taught 10-year-olds. So the guy who taught me growing up never met his father. Mother basically ran the streets. Was raised by his grandmother. His name is Kerry Holly. He had a huge influence on me. He taught me probably for 6 or 7, 8 years. He went on to be an IBM fellow. He's traveled the world. He's got all these patents. He's one of the top black research scientists. Another young guy, Ronald Ragland, who played at King, helped me manage the Chicago public schools. Michael Clark Duncan was went on to, very sadly died, very early, but was a Hollywood star. Corky Lyons became a doctor, and this was one little corner of 46 in Greenwood. And what I always thought, these kids had this amazing potential and talent. And I always thought, what about the kids who didn't have the chance to go to a program like my mother's? How much talent are we losing? And it doesn't matter where you start or what the background is. If we as adults have high expectations and love and support and stay with kids through good and bad times, they can do amazing things. And so that literally has shaped my life's work.
Wow, I love that. So you go from lab and you have a successful academic and athletic career at University of Chicago Lab School. You chose Harvard, and you get a chance to play professional basketball. Share that with us.
So again, my dreams and passion were larger than my talent. And so once I made the team, had a decent career, my goal was to play professionally. And again, that's pretty non-traditional at a place like Harvard, and was not a All-American, didn't go to the Final Four, wasn't winning Big Ten championships like you guys. But that was my dream, and it's interesting, the assistant coach at Harvard was a guy named Tom Thibodeau, who went on to coach the Bulls and now just got the job with the Minnesota Timberwolves. But where, again, it probably wasn't quite rational, but he didn't tell me I was crazy. And so after my senior year, we worked extraordinarily hard. We're in the gym early in the morning, after school, late at night, and was lucky enough to be invited to the Boston Celtics camp, didn't make the team, and wasn't quite sure, was there a next step or not, or was that the end of the road? So that was a tough time. And then thankfully, my agent got a call from a team in Australia, and literally the other side of the world, never had occurred to me. And so I had 3 or 4 months there when I wasn't quite sure whether I should give up on this dream and go get a real job and move on in my life. And if something hadn't happened, I would have had to just sort of let that go, and that would have been very hard. But was so lucky to have that opportunity. Ended up playing in Australia for 4 years. Was just an amazing, amazing chance to fulfill my dream of playing professionally. Met my wife there, which obviously that changes your life. And, live here now, obviously. But I feel so fortunate to have had that opportunity. There's so many players who were better than me, worked as hard, better athletes who didn't get that lucky. So I know how lucky that was. And to just have the chance to work hard every single day. I was working out 2-3 times a day, trying to compete and trying to be successful. And to have the luxury of being able to do that was an amazing gift.
And so you made it what to me seemed like a seamless transition coming back to Chicago. You got right into education. I believe you partnered with John Rogers, helping his charter school.
Yeah, well, it's actually, we're sort of here at Ariel Capital, which is John Rogers' office, but again, sort of small world and lesson. So when I was in middle school, 5th and 6th grade, 7th grade, John Rogers was the star of the high school basketball team at Lab. And he was my big hero. He was my Michael Jordan. I followed him around like a puppy dog. Probably couldn't shake me. And we sort of became lifelong friends. And he was the big brother I never had and the mentor. And as we're all getting a little older, I'm 51 now, so he's been in my life for 40 years. It's sort of crazy. And there's not a major decision I've made in life over the last 40 years without talking to him and getting his advice and input. Short story, though, is I was getting very comfortable in Australia. I was making pretty good money. They pay you to play, they give you a house, they give you a car. I met my wife. And it sounds a little strange or corny, but I really thought if I would have stayed another year or two, I would still be living in Australia. It's a very seductive life.
Okay.
And I thought I didn't want to get that comfortable. And I basically walked away from playing, which was a hard thing to do because you and I both love to play. But I really wanted to come back here and help out because, again, so many people had given me these opportunities academically, athletically, play professionally, live on the other side of the world. I just didn't want to fade away into the sunset. So John is just an extraordinary individual whose business, he was at that point, 29, 30, still young. His business was starting to take off. Rather than buying a house or a car or a boat or whatever, he wanted to help the community. And he just knew of my family's work in the neighborhoods, what my mom had done, my passion, and basically asked me to come back and help set up his nonprofit, his foundation. So I left playing basketball to come back here and do that work, and that's why I'm back here today.
And you must have done an excellent job because you left that situation and you ran the Chicago Public Schools.
Yeah. I ran his nonprofit for 6 years, and we ran an I Have a Dream program. We started our own small public school, Ariel Community Academy, which we loved that work. And the thing I always thought about, Steve, was scale and impact. So the first thing we did, I Have a Dream program, was my job. My sister for 6 years was working with 40 kids, and I loved it. And it was the best job I ever did, and tutoring and mentoring and working with their families every day after school. Then we started a small public school that is still in existence today. It's one of the highest performing neighborhood schools in Chicago, Ariel Community Academy. That served 400. And went from 40 to 400. Loved that, but thought about, again, if you really want to have impact and scale, the Chicago Public Schools was 400,000. Right. So the math of that was very interesting to me. And honestly, Steve, for me, often growing up, all the time, my mom, the honest truth is that many times we felt like the public schools were the enemy, that we were trying to do at night for kids what they weren't getting academically during the day.
Interesting.
And I just thought it's easy to be a critic from the outside. It's easy to throw stones. It's a very different thing to try and roll up your sleeves and go inside and try and have impact. So both the challenge of scale, or the opportunity of scale, and the challenge for me personally, okay, I can critique what they're doing. Can I go make something better? That's what led me to go work for the system.
And we know that that's a challenging job, and one that probably was a pretty good training ground, so to speak, when President Obama asked you to become the Secretary of Education. What was that like, Arne? What's it like when the president asked you to come and be the head of education?
Well, again, there's all these relationships, and basketball is a pretty constant theme here. So the original connection was actually through the First Lady, Michelle Obama, through her brother, Craig. And Craig is a good friend of both of ours, and he and I played 3-on-3s across the country for years. He was a great player. And so originally, now President Obama was Craig's little sister's boyfriend. Right. That was sort of the start of this thing. And played with the president over years at, around Hyde Park at the University of Chicago in the field house. Ultimately, he obviously went to the state legislature and the Senate. And it was amazing to see him sort of take that next step to become president. It's crazy.
Right.
And it's not too often in life your friend becomes president. It's clearly a once in a lifetime thing. The thing for me, I did not want to leave Chicago. There's so much turnover in urban school superintendents. I had done 7.5 years. The average tenure is like 2 years, 2.5 years. It's crazy.
Okay.
I wanted to do 10, so I was not looking to go. And I wasn't, I have a lot of friends who I wouldn't have gone to work for them as president. President Obama was just someone I just had just the highest of respect for. And we had done a lot of work together educationally. Mm-hmm. I knew his values. I knew his commitment to making a difference. And so I don't say this lightly, that was the only job in the world that I would have left the Chicago Public Schools for at that time, to go work for him. Didn't want to leave Chicago, didn't want to move my family to DC. I'm a Chicago boy through and through. But the chance, again, to have impact not on 400,000, but the national level, 53 million kids, mm-hmm. to think about early childhood, K-12, higher education, to be part of his team and that sort of historic movement. One hand is a hard decision. Honestly, it was like a one-sentence conversation with my wife, and he was thinking about it, and he ultimately said, "Do you want to come be part of the team?" And we're in. So right. It's a no-brainer. It's That's a no-brainer. Great.
So share with our chapter members some of the duties that you had as education secretary. Kind of give us kind of a Cliff Notes version, if you will.
We tried to work at every level of the education continuum. So I'm a huge believer in early childhood education.
Sure.
I think that's the best investment we can make. So we worked very hard to increase access there. And with Congress's support, we put more than $1 billion behind early childhood education. We did a lot to try and improve what's happening K-12. And while many children are served well, there are too many children who are not. Mm-hmm. And so we fought hard to raise standards, to raise graduation rates. One of the things I'm most proud of is we led to historic highs in graduation rates, with every subgroup improving: white, black, Latino, Native American, Asian American, poor kids, English language learners. Everyone is doing better. Having said that, and all these things, we're nowhere near where we need to be as a nation. Sure. I always feel this huge sense of urgency to improve faster. And for me, it's not just education for education's sake. Well, that's a big deal. It's really, for me, how do you end poverty? How do you fight for social justice? Mm-hmm. I think the only way we can give kids a chance to get a good job and enter the middle class today is to get a great education. And then ultimately, for me, the goal is not high school graduation. It's some form of higher education beyond that. So we put $40 billion behind Pell Grants to help more children who weren't born of a lot of means. More young people have the chance to go to college. That was fantastic. We focused heavily on community colleges, really trying to shine a spotlight there. And whether you're 18-year-olds or 58-year-olds coming back to retrain and retool for the
right.
new economy, tried to put more resources there. We took on very tough issues around sexual assault on campus and trying to better protect young men, but predominantly young women on campus, and make sure they are safe and can go through that experience. We challenged for-profit colleges that were not doing a good job, that were taking taxpayer money, but not providing a quality education. And so we thought about it sort of cradle to career. So it's a pretty big expanse. It's about a $70 billion budget. And again, to have a chance to try and take the lessons I learned as a child from my mother's program and from 46 in Greenwood, and try and apply some of those lessons at scale around the nation. It's just a crazy dream come true.
I want to go back. You were talking about some of the responsibilities with the Department of Education, and it's interesting. Your senior thesis at Harvard talked about the opportunities of the underclass. And so I just want to really hammer home that this is a lifelong mission for Arne. This wasn't new when he got to DC. This has been a continual theme of trying to improve others' lives through education and sports. And you notice how seamlessly he talks about team, leadership, those type of things with his job description as well as his athletic experience. So I really appreciate you tying that in together, because that's something that...
You did your homework, boy. That thesis is old now. So.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, it's a common theme, though, right?
Yeah. And what you didn't know is, I didn't even mention it, is that I took a year off, again, a little non-traditional, between my junior and senior year of college to work with my mom full-time. And I wrote my senior thesis about her program in the neighborhood. Okay. But for me, it was a chance. Most of my friends there were becoming investment bankers and lawyers, and that didn't feel right for me. And so that year was really a test to figure out, was this work a piece of who I was, or was it really who I was at my core? And so I had that chance to work full-time with my mother. I basically decided, I didn't know how, but this was the work that I wanted to be my life's work. And so did my senior thesis as part of that time. But it was a real test for me, again, to how much was I committed to this. You know, you could always help on the side, do another career, but I decided that wasn't for me, and I wanted to go this other route.
Now that's really interesting, Arne, because we stress the importance of internships with young people in this chapter. How did you come about, how did you come to that decision?
I was struggling, I think, is the honest answer. And I think the idea of sort of a gap year or a year off is much more common now than it was then. And studying overseas, which I think is a great thing, and that didn't quite exist. But I guess, I was doing some soul searching is the honest answer, and really trying to, figure out at my core, what was my identity? What was my passion? What did I want to do in my life? And I was lucky enough that I had that chance, this is what my family did. So I had that clear avenue, which every child doesn't have. But I guess the honest answer is I knew I wasn't ready for life after college if I wasn't clear what I wanted to do. And so that for me was that chance again to test myself. And so I felt I needed it. Taking that year between my junior and senior year, that was hard. That's late to do that. Often, folks do that younger, even between high school and college. Had those opportunities existed, I may have done those earlier. They just didn't happen. But I think for me, at some level, I was, self-aware enough to know that I needed to stop and sort of check myself and figure out what was the right path, what was the right direction for me.
Golden nuggets. I'm telling you guys, I hope you're really paying attention. So Arne, being one of the most successful that we've seen in education and in sports, didn't quite know what he wanted to do at Harvard. And you graduated magna cum laude, right?
Yes, sir.
So this is a man with tremendous success, and yet he had some struggles in college, similar to what some of you all do as well. So don't get discouraged. Just take your time, talk to people that can help you figure out your path, and use Arne as an example because he's gone on to do great things. Let me talk a little bit about your unique position with Education Secretary. And you had a lot of opposition with some of the things that you were trying to do. Share with our chapter members how you overcame that opposition and still got the job done.
So a couple things. First of all, for me, the true north has always been we have to fight for kids, and we have to fight to create opportunity. And again, to go at every level, early childhood education, just a desperate need there. We have to give more chances there. K to 12, when kids drop out of high school today, they're basically condemned to poverty and social failure. There are no good jobs out there. And then again, the goal for me is not just high school graduation, it's what are you doing beyond that for university, to your community college, trade, technical, vocational training. So we were fighting to create more opportunity. And where you have opposition, and again, it's interesting, sort of the sports background, you're used to people booing you, you're used to people throwing stuff at you. And honestly, it makes you focus more. And I think that lesson of shooting a foul shot and 20,000 people hoping you miss and you got to make it, that laser focus I thought was unbelievable training. So again, the lessons from me, the basketball court, to the world of work were huge. And so we made lots of mistakes. We did not begin to do everything perfectly, but we were very, very clear on our mission. We were clear what we were trying to do. And if that ruffled some feathers or if that challenged some folks, that was not only okay, we were trying to challenge the status quo.
Okay. And
I don't think we're doing enough educationally. I know we're not doing enough educationally. And so if we were just perpetuating the status quo and perpetuating mediocrity, then I would think we were part of the problem, not part of the solution. And so the goal was never to make enemies. The goal was always to build coalitions and to move people together. But if we were challenging, that was very, very intentional. And when you look at achievement gaps, when you look at the lack of educational opportunity, whether it's in inner city urban neighborhoods, whether it's in rural America, no place is it harder hit than on Native American reservations. I spent lots of time in those communities, and it was both unbelievably inspiring and just terribly heartbreaking as well. Kids across the nation deserve better, so many, than what we're giving them. And I would say kids have one chance to get an education. We can't wait 10 or 15 years. And if we don't do it, that cost is staggeringly high today. And so, yes, we pushed very, very hard. We challenged. Very proud of how far we got. But it was interesting, Steve. The critique I always got is that we were going too fast. The honest self-critique is we were going too slow. And we have to find ways to get better faster.
So I was going to ask you, do you have any regrets, or would you change any decisions that you made while you were education secretary?
So I talked about some of the things I'm most proud of. There are absolutely things that we failed at and didn't get done. I'll sort of walk through a couple. I talked about the focus on early childhood education. We made an unprecedented investment of more than $1 billion, which I loved. The truth is, though, the United States ranks like 27th, 28th relative to other nations in providing those opportunities. And there's a waiting list of millions of kids around the nation today who enter kindergarten at 5, a year to a year and a half behind because we haven't given them that chance. And the fact that we weren't able to get folks in Congress to have the sort of massive investment that we needed to level that playing field and get those kids off the waiting list, that's a tremendous regret. Another one is we desperately wanted to give college financial aid to undocumented youngsters, students, dreamers, and really hoped immigration reform would happen. And that didn't happen. And the fact that we have so many hardworking kids who, the United States is their home, it's the country they were raised in, they love it, they got great grades, they're great leaders, they did community service, they graduated from high school, and then we say, you can't go to college?
Right.
I just think we're cutting off our nose to spite our face. And these young people are future entrepreneurs and innovators and job creators, and we're just pushing them to the margins of society. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. And we did not break through on that, so that's a failure. And then the last one is very personal. It's sort of around the issue of gun violence, and it was such a difficult issue for me growing up here in Chicago and leading Chicago public schools. That was by far the hardest issue I dealt with. Nothing came close, and nothing was harder than going to the funerals of the kids we lost here and going to their homes and speaking to their parents and going to a classroom where there's an empty desk and trying to make some sense of that for classmates. It was staggering. And I've talked about this, the president has talked about this publicly. Obviously, the president dealt with literally the hardest issues in the world, literally. And his hardest day and my hardest day was after the massacre in Newtown, Connecticut, the Sandy Hook massacre. And we never anticipated, 20 babies and 5 teachers and the principals just being killed. And the fact that as a nation, we've utterly failed to have any kind of common sense gun control legislation passed is a desperate failure. And the theme for me, Steve, that runs through, I've thought a lot about it, the theme that runs through those three: lack of early childhood education, lack of college opportunity for dreamers, not keeping our children safe as other nations do. I just think as a nation, we don't value our children enough. And that's a hard thing to say. But if we truly believed every child has unique genius and gifts and is special, we'd give them the chance to get a great pre-K education. We'd give them the chance to go to college. We'd keep them safe and help them grow up living free of fear. Other nations choose to do these things, and we have not yet done that. And that's, I'm going to continue to challenge that status quo every single day.
Very well said, Arne. We're going to pivot a little bit from that and go a little bit more to the combination of how athletics and leadership kind of tie in. Recently we had the opportunity to interview Jeff Salingo. He's one of the leading authorities in higher education. And he mentioned that employers love to hire former athletes because they are committed, team-oriented, and they know how to overcome adversity. These are some of the soft skills that National Society of Leadership and Success try to pass on. Why is this so important in today's workplace?
So first of all, we need better names. I hate the name soft skills because they're so important, and they're not soft.
What would you call it?
I don't have a better name, so I got to work. I'm not good at branding and marketing, but they are. We talk about hard skills and soft skills. They're both equally, critically, vitally important, and so one's for me not more important than the other. But again, it's all the lessons there are leadership lessons, and for us it was basketball. For other folks, it's different things. But I always say, basketball both shapes and reveals character. And if you are selfish, if you don't work hard, if you blame others when things get tough, if you crumple under adversity, you can't fake that. That will be revealed on the basketball court. You can't pretend to be someone who you are not. The flip side is, and these are all leadership skills, you're not born with them or born without them. You can develop them. They're like muscles. And if you practice really truly being unselfish and thinking about the team, if you practice working really, really hard, if you practice handling adversity and being tough in those situations and getting more focused, not less focused on unraveling, if you can do those things on the basketball court, you can do those in life. And again, so much of the adversity I faced, in a work setting, was frankly easier than some of the challenges you feel, in a very competitive situation, in a hostile or adverse environment. And so I absolutely think athletics in general, sports, and for us specifically basketball, is a great place to build character, to build leadership skills that help make you a better teammate and make you a better leader, but a better leader not just on the court, more importantly off the court. And I think that's why it's so important for kids to have these kinds of opportunities, because it's hard to teach these skills in algebra or in biology or geometry. And the playing field or the basketball court is just an amazing place to teach those skills. And as we were talking earlier, I'm starting to coach a little bit now, and for me, that's the most important part, is can you help young men and women gain these skills that for the rest of their life are going to put them in a position to be successful. So I didn't know that growing up, but I can say unequivocally that the opportunities I've had, I would never have had those opportunities and had whatever little bit of success I've had I not had the chance to hone those skills from a very early age, every single day playing ball.
We're going to wrap up here shortly, but I wanted to circle back to a point that I think is highly important. You were a very successful basketball player at Harvard. You were magna cum laude. You graduated, top of your class. How did you manage that, and what did you have to give up to find that success in both on the court and off the court?
And these are great questions. I don't know if this was true for you, because you obviously had tremendous success in both as well. But I always found I actually got better grades during the season when I had less time than after the season.
Yes.
And basically, during the season, I was literally either in the gym or I was in the library. And so what do you give up? You don't have much of a social life.
Right.
You're not going to all the parties. And that's tempting, and it's an important experience, part of that. But that wasn't what drove me. That wasn't what motivated me. And the discipline of, okay, I'm going to practice, and I'm going to the library, and I'm going to eat, and I'm going to bed, that routine helps you be successful. After the season, you had more time, and more time wasn't always a good thing, and you had to sort of figure out how to manage that time well. But for me, those two things were always complementary, not in conflict with each other. And it meant there were 10 other things that would have been nice to do socially that I wasn't able to do. Mm-hmm. But I have zero regrets on that. And I think being able to focus, and there's, I think something you and I both try to do, there's sort of the myth of the dumb jock or whatever. Yes. And in fact, if you look at the college graduation rates of student athletes and grade point averages, they're actually higher than the norm. And so, yes, if you just want to play a sport and do nothing else, you can do that. It's just extraordinarily short-sighted and self-destructive. And for me, trying to be successful in the classroom, trying to be successful on the court, that was sort of how I was raised. So that was not a leap for me. And those values were just very, very important. Again, absolutely complementary and not contradictory.
Well said. Do you still play?
I still try and play, yes. Yeah. I'm slower than ever. I was always slow. At some point, you can't slow down anymore, but I still love it. So, yeah, that's my stress relief, and it's still fun to get out there.
So Arne's really low-key and humble. Arne can shoot the leather off the ball, moves without the ball. He's very difficult to defend. I remember trying to guard him, and Arne does not stop moving. Like, have you always played that way, where you were just constant moving, watching the ball, trying to get in position?
Again, I had some strengths, I had some weaknesses. A strength was I always had good endurance. A weakness is I was just really, really slow. So I couldn't just make one cut and expect to get open. But yes, so you had to take your weaknesses and try and make them somehow strengths or work around them. And if you're playing against someone who's faster than you, more athletic than you, if you make one cut, they can stay with you. If you make 10 cuts, maybe on the 9th or 10th one, they get a little tired, or they wear down a little bit, or their mental, their concentration breaks down a little bit. And so the more I could just stay active, stay moving, that gave me a chance to compete against players who are better than me.
He said he took some of his weaknesses and made them into strengths. That this is all applicable to the classroom and beyond in terms of leadership. We're going to wrap up, my man. I really appreciate your time. We've got a State of Mind shirt to present to you from the National Society of Leadership and Success, and it's also got the state of Illinois on it
Oh, cool. Appreciate
for
it.
you, so you can
Yeah,
rock
yeah,
that
yeah.
as much as you want.
I'll wear it this weekend.
Okay. And I really appreciate it, man.
Thanks for
Thanks
your time.
a lot for your time.
Great questions. You did a great job.
And thank you to Arne Duncan, good friend of mine, former education secretary, and we'll be doing big things around education and the development of young people around this country.